A mountain man's dog found a dying woman, but when he saw her name, his heart stopped. The wind whistled through the Bitterroot Mountains, carrying the scent of pine, snow, and loneliness. For Elias Creed, the mountains were all he had left. He'd built his cabin high above the valley floor, where no man came unless he was running from something, or someone. Elias had been both. The early morning sun was weak, filtering through a silver mist that clung to the trees. A slow thaw was coming, and the ice along the creek cracked like distant rifle fire. Elias's hound, Ruger, a scarred old shepherd mix, trotted ahead with nose low to the ground, tail stiff and alert. Elias walked behind him, rifle over his shoulder, quiet as the forest itself. Hunting wasn't just for meat, it was habit, survival, routine. The only rhythm that made sense anymore. When the hound suddenly stopped, Elias froze too. Ruger growled low, deep in his chest, then barked once, sharp, urgent. "Easy, boy," Elias muttered, but the dog took off downhill, bounding through brush and snow patches like a streak of lightning. Elias followed, boots crunching hard against frozen ground. His breath fogged the air as he ducked under branches, heart thudding with instinctive alertness. Ruger only barked like that when something was wrong, when something alive was near. Then he saw her. At the bottom of a small ravine, half covered in dust and snow, lay a woman. Her pale hands were scraped raw, her dress torn and muddied from travel. Her bonnet had fallen aside, revealing hair the color of chestnut bark, tangled and crusted with dried blood. Ruger circled her carefully, whimpering now, tail lowered. Elias dropped to one knee beside her. She was breathing but barely. Her lips were cracked, her skin cold, and when he brushed snow from her shoulder, a folded letter slipped from her hand. The wax seal was broken but still visible. Red Creek Matrimonial Bureau. His brow furrowed. That name scraped against old memories. He picked up the letter, careful not to tear it further. When he turned it toward the light, his breath caught. Miss Clara Holt. The words hit him like a bullet. That name, her name, was carved somewhere deep in him where regret lived. The woman he'd once written to. The one who'd written back with promises of forever. The one who'd changed her mind before they ever met. He looked down at her again, hardly believing what his eyes saw. Her face, though pale and worn, was the same one he'd once imagined by his fire on lonely nights. He tore open the letter, half dreading what he'd find inside. It was short, written in delicate script. "Mr. Creed, I have reconsidered your offer. Circumstances have changed and I cannot come west. Please forgive me. Clara Holt." The paper was dated nearly 2 years ago. Elias folded it slowly, his rough hands trembling. "What the hell are you doing here, Clara?" he whispered under his breath. Her eyelids fluttered. "Water?" she rasped, voice thin as smoke. He pulled his canteen from his belt and held it to her lips. She drank weakly, gasping. When she tried to sit up, she collapsed into his arms. "Easy now," he said softly, lifting her gently. She weighed little more than the rifle on his back. "You'll be all right. I got you." As he carried her up the ravine, snow began to fall, fine and whispering, like the sky wanted to bury the whole mountain before night. Ruger ran ahead, looking back every few yards as if guiding the way home. Elias trudged through the drifts, his breath ragged, his heart pounding with something that wasn't just exertion. The past he thought he'd buried was suddenly alive again, trembling in his arms. By the time he reached his cabin, darkness had swallowed the woods. The fire inside was cold, but he kicked it to life with kindling and pine sap. He laid her on his bed, covered her with every blanket he owned, and stoked the flames until the cabin glowed. Her breathing steadied, but she was still far from safe. Her feet were frostbitten, her pulse weak. He ground herbs from his shelf, mixed them into warm water, and pressed the cloth to her forehead. He watched her for a long time, listening to the storm build outside. He'd lived up here 3 years without another soul, content to let the world forget him. But tonight, the world had found him again, in the form of a dying woman with a name that had haunted him since the day she turned him down. Ruger whined softly at the door, glancing between his master and the woman. Elias whispered into the still air, half to himself, half to the heavens. "Guess fate's got a damn strange sense of humor." He sat by the fire until dawn, never once taking his eyes off her. And though he didn't know it yet, the moment he found her in that ravine, his quiet life on the mountain had ended forever. The first snowstorm of the season came down the mountain like a living thing, roaring, relentless, and cold enough to split stone. By the time Elias Creed got the woman settled by his hearth, the wind was screaming through the pines, and drifts piled high against the cabin walls. Inside, the fire burned low but steady, throwing light over rough-hewn logs, an old rocking chair, and the shadowed shape of a woman fighting for breath. Ruger lay near the door, head between his paws, eyes fixed on her as if he understood the weight of what had just entered their lives. Elias wrung out a cloth and dabbed her forehead again. Her skin burned hot beneath his calloused fingers. Fever. He cursed under his breath, reached for his tin kettle, and poured more water into a cracked basin. "Don't you die on me now," he muttered. "Not after comin' all this way." She stirred, lips moving but words lost in the crackle of the fire. He leaned closer. "Marshal Pike," she whispered. He can't find the papers." Then she went still again, sinking back into delirium. Elias frowned. He didn't know the name, but it sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold outside. He stripped off her soaked cloak and saw bruises beneath, dark patches on her arms and ribs. Whoever had left her to die hadn't done it by accident. He drew the blanket higher around her shoulders and sat back, eyes narrowing at the letter still resting on his table. Red Creek Matrimonial Bureau. And beneath it her name, Clara Holt. It didn't make sense. She had written him off, sent that curt note saying she'd reconsidered. And yet here she was, half dead in the wilderness, miles from any trail fit for a lady to travel. What? The storm battered the cabin harder, rattling shutters and shaking snow from the roof. Elias stood, moved to the window and stared out into the white blur. Somewhere beyond that curtain of snow lay tracks, a story and danger. Ruger gave a low growl, sensing his unease. "Yeah," Elias murmured, "I feel it too." He checked his rifle, loaded 6 fresh rounds, then sat again by the fire. Time stretched out, marked only by the slow tick of melting snow from her boots and the soft wheeze of her breathing. Every so often, her eyes fluttered open, confused, frightened, and each time he met them, something inside him twisted. The years fell away and he saw the young man he'd been, full of hope, waiting on a letter that never came. Now that same woman lay dying in his bed, clutching secrets instead of promises. When she finally woke near dawn, the storm had eased into silence. Pale light slipped through the chinks in the wall. Elias had dozed off in the chair beside her, hat tilted forward, hands folded on his chest. He looked older in sleep, the hard lines of solitude etched deep into his face. Clara blinked slowly, disoriented. The last thing she remembered was a horse collapsing under her, men shouting, gunfire echoing through the pines. Then darkness and a voice calling her name. She turned her head, gasping softly when she saw him. "Elias." His eyes opened instantly, clear and sharp as a blade. He leaned forward, almost not trusting what he heard. "You remember me?" Her voice was weak but certain. "How could I forget?" He swallowed hard, looking away as he stirred the fire. "You near froze out there. Been 2 days since I found you." Clara's gaze drifted around the cabin. Rough walls, a single shelf of books, the faint smell of pine smoke and coffee. Where am I?" "My place. North ridge of Bitterroot. You're safe." She tried to sit up, wincing. "Safe." She laughed faintly, the sound brittle. "No one's safe anymore." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Her eyes darted to the table, the letter still there, half open. A tremor passed through her. "You read it?" "Just the name," he said evenly. "Couldn't help notice it was mine." She looked away, ashamed. "I didn't know where else to go. You could have gone anywhere but here." Her lips trembled, tears shining in her eyes. "They said you were dangerous. But the only danger I found was out there." He didn't answer. He simply poured her a cup of hot water with honey and held it out. Her hands shook as she took it, but the warmth steadied her. The fire popped. Snow slid off the roof in heavy sheets. For a long while neither spoke. There was only the crackle of burning pine and the low sigh of wine through the chimney. Finally Clara said softly, "I didn't come looking for you. I came to deliver something, but they found me first." Elias leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. "Who?" Her eyes met his, wide and frightened. "Men working for a lawman named Pike. He's not what he seems. I had proof, letters, documents. They'll kill me if they know I'm alive." Elias studied her face, the fear there real and deep. "Then you ain't going nowhere till you can walk, and I know who's comin'. He stood, moved toward the door and opened it just enough to look out. The snow was still falling but softer now, blanketing the land in quiet white. He turned back to her. "You rest. I'll see to the trail." As he stepped outside, Ruger followed, barking once before darting into the drifts. Inside, Clara lay staring at the ceiling, the firelight flickering across her face. She clutched the edge of the blanket, whispering his name again. Elias Creed. A man she'd once feared. A man she now owed her life to. And though she didn't yet understand it, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break between them. The storm passed overnight, leaving the Bitterroot Mountains wrapped in an eerie silence. The world was white now, quiet, vast and cold. Every sound seemed to carry farther, the creak of trees, the drip of melting snow, the distant call of a raven. Elias Creed stood outside his cabin at first light, coat collar turned up, scanning the tree line. His rifle rested in his hands, though there was no clear threat, not yet. But he'd lived too long in the wilderness to mistake peace for safety. Ruger sniffed the air, pacing near the stacked firewood, tail stiff. "Yeah, I smell it too," Elias muttered. Smoke. Faint but real. Somewhere down the ridge, another fire was burning. And not the kind a trapper builds to keep warm, this was larger, angrier. He crouched, brushing snow away to find the faint imprint of horse tracks heading north. Fresh. The snow hadn't yet filled them. He followed them for a few yards, hand brushing the grip of his revolver. Then he stopped. The tracks came from the south, the direction Clara had crawled out of. When he returned to the cabin, Clara was sitting up in bed, pale but awake. The firelight painted her face in shades of gold and sorrow. "You shouldn't be on your feet yet," he said, hanging his rifle near the door. "I heard you leave," she replied softly. "I thought, maybe they'd found us." "Who exactly are they?" She hesitated, fingers tightening on the blanket. "Men working for Marshal Pike. He runs the law office in Red Creek, or pretends to." Elias frowned. Marshal Pike's been the name on wanted posters round these parts for years. Never thought he'd climbed high enough to wear a badge. Clara nodded weakly. "He doesn't deserve one. He's taken land meant for war widows, using forged deeds and false records. My father worked in the land office, before they silenced him. I found proof after he passed. Letters, documents, things that could destroy Pike's whole operation." Elias's eyes narrowed. "And you came all the way out here with that?" "I had nowhere else," she whispered. "The bureau was supposed to send me to a husband for protection. They said your name still sat on file. I thought, maybe." Her voice faltered. Elias looked down, jaw tightening. "You thought wrong. That was a long time ago." Clara flinched, but she didn't look away. "Maybe. But your dog still found me when I needed saving." The word struck deep. Ruger lifted his head, tail thumping once against the floor as if agreeing. Elias poured her a cup of water and handed it over, rough hand brushing her delicate fingers. The contact was brief, but it sparked a strange ache in both of them, something half remembered, half new. He cleared his throat. "You said Pike's men are looking for those papers. You still have them?" Clara nodded slowly, glancing toward the satchel beneath the bed. "Hidden, yes. I couldn't risk losing them." Elias moved to the window again. The smoke had thickened in the distance, maybe 5 miles out. Too close. He turned back. "Pack what you can carry. If Pike's riding this way, this cabin ain't safe no more." Clara's eyes widened. "You mean to run?" "Mean to live," he said flatly. "And keep you alive too." She hesitated. "You don't even know me anymore, Elias." He gave her a hard look. "Don't need to. Found you half dead on my land. That makes you my problem." Despite his rough tone, Clara saw something in his eyes, a flicker of the man she'd once imagined writing letters by lamplight, words filled with hope. The fire popped, breaking the silence. "Where will we go?" she asked. "There's an old line cabin near Crow's Pass," he said, loading his rifle and checking his revolver. "We can lay low there till I figure who's trailin' us and why." Ruger barked once, ears perked toward the woods. Elias froze. Another sound drifted through the trees, distant hooves. "Slow. Careful." He blew out the lantern and gestured for Clara to stay still. Through the window, he saw 3 riders weaving between the trees, their shapes blurred by fog but their direction unmistakable, toward the cabin. Clara clutched the blanket, eyes wide with terror. "It's them," she whispered. Elias nodded, calm but cold. "Then they're about to wish they'd stayed in town." He moved like a man who'd done this before, fast, quiet, every motion precise. He barred the door, checked his ammunition, and positioned himself behind the window frame with the rifle aimed downslope. Outside, the riders dismounted, their horses snorting steam into the frozen air. One called out, voice thick with arrogance. "Cabin looks fresh, boys. Might be the one the boss said to check." Another man laughed. "If she's here, she's ours. Marshall wants her alive, mostly." Elias's jaw set. Clara's heart pounded so loud she could barely breathe. She reached for Ruger, the dog pressing close to her side, silent now, waiting for his master's signal. Elias whispered, "When I open that back door, you take Ruger and go for the Pine Ridge. Stay low, don't stop till you reach the creek. I'll find you." Clara shook her head fiercely. "No." He cut her off with a hard look. "Ain't a discussion." Before she could argue, glass shattered. A bullet punched through the window, splintering wood beside Elias's head. He fired back. One of the men fell. The others dove for cover. Smoke filled the cabin, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the scent of pine and fear. Elias grabbed the back door latch, shoving it open. Snow swirled in. "Go," he hissed. Ruger barked once and bolted out. Clara hesitated only a heartbeat, just long enough to see Elias's silhouette framed against the firelight, rifle steady, defiant. Then she ran into the storm. The trees swallowed her up, Ruger bounding beside her. Behind, the mountains echoed with gunfire, and the promise of something far darker still to come. The night swallowed Clara whole. Snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the forest until even sound seemed to disappear. Only her ragged breathing and Ruger's soft whine broke the silence as they stumbled through the dark, branches clawing at her dress. She didn't know how long she ran before her knees gave out. She collapsed beside a fallen pine, clutching Ruger's fur like a lifeline. Her body trembled from exhaustion, fear, and the cold creeping through her bones. "Elias," she whispered, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of him. Somewhere in the distance a rifle cracked. Once, then twice. Then silence again. The echoes died against the mountains. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips. "Please God, keep him alive." Moments later, the sound of boots crunching snow reached her ears. Ruger tensed, teeth bared, then relaxed as Elias emerged from the darkness, rifle slung over one shoulder, breath steaming in the cold air. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low, rough but steady. Clara could only nod, tears spilling down her cheeks. You came back." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Didn't reckon I'd let my dog chase after you without following the..." Behind him, the faint glow of distant fire painted the sky orange. Clara followed his gaze. "The cabin? Burned?" Elias said flatly. "Pike's men torched it before they rode off. They think we're dead." The words hung heavy between them. He reached out, offering his hand. "We'll rest at the cave near the ridge. Come on now." She took it without hesitation. His hand was rough, warm, steady, the first thing that had felt safe in days. They made their way to the narrow cave tucked into the base of a cliff. Inside, the air was dry, the walls blackened from old fires. Elias quickly built a new one, the flames flickering and dancing across their tired faces. Clara sat close to the fire, rubbing her hands for warmth. Elias watched her quietly as he cleaned his rifle, his mind turning over everything she'd said about Pike, about the documents. But more than that, he couldn't stop looking at her. She wasn't the same woman he'd imagined from her letters. She was braver, harder, scarred by loss but unbroken. He handed her a piece of jerky and a cup of boiled coffee. "Ain't much, but it'll keep you standing." She smiled faintly. "Better than anything I've had in days." Silence stretched between them, comfortable for a while. Then Clara spoke softly, eyes on the flames. "I never meant to hurt you, Elias." He didn't look up. "Could have fooled me." Her voice trembled. "When the Bureau wrote about you, they said you were a killer. That you lived like a savage up here, far from the law. My family begged me not to come. I believed them. I was a coward." Elias set the rifle aside and leaned forward, his face half lit by firelight. "Wasn't a duel," he said quietly. "That man I shot, he was beating my brother half to death. I did what I had to. Law never cared much for the truth." Clara's eyes glistened. "I know that now. I learned too late what kind of men wear badges in this territory." He looked into the fire, the light flickering across the scar on his jaw. "And you came out here carrying papers that could get you killed for it?" She nodded slowly. "I thought maybe if I delivered them myself to Fort Clay, someone would listen. But Pike found out. His men chased me for 2 days before my horse collapsed. I thought I was going to die out there." Elias stirred the fire, his jaw working as he took in her words. "You nearly did." She reached out then, tentative, trembling, and placed her hand over his. "But you found me." He froze, the contact sending warmth through him sharper than the fire. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Elias said quietly, "You should sleep. We'll head out at dawn. If Pike's riding south, we'll go north to Fort Clay. It's a long haul, but that's where your truth needs telling." Clara hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "And when we get there?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then you tell your story, and I go back to my mountain. Something in her chest tightened. You could come with me. You don't have to be alone anymore. Elias gave a faint, sad smile. Some men are built for crowds, Miss Holt. I'm not one of them. Don't call me that, she said softly. He looked up, puzzled. She met his gaze, eyes shimmering in the firelight. After everything we've been through, just call me Clara. The way she said it, quiet but full of meaning, cut through the silence like a prayer. Elias held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. All right then, Clara. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the cries of wolves and the whisper of snow. Inside the cave, firelight flickered over two souls drawn together by fate, danger, and the unspoken promise of something neither dared name. When she finally drifted into sleep, Elias sat awake by the fire, his eyes on her face. He'd once believed love was a fool's dream, something the mountain had buried with the rest of his past. But now, staring at her in the soft glow of the flames, he wasn't so sure anymore. The dawn broke pale and cold over the Sierra Ridge. Frost glittered on the pines like powdered glass, and smoke from the dying fire curled into the frozen air. Elias was already awake, crouched near the cave's mouth, watching the valley below. Clara stirred behind him, pulling his worn coat tighter around her shoulders. The mountain air bit through even thick wool. He turned as she sat up, her hair loose, firelight catching its soft copper sheen. You sleep at all? He asked quietly. A little, she murmured. I dreamt of the cabin, before it burned. He nodded grimly. Then we moved before they circled back. They packed quickly, a few strips of dried meat, the rifle and Clara's precious satchel. She clutched it close to her chest as they stepped into the snow-dusted world beyond the cave. 4 hours they climbed through dense timber, leaving no trail. Ruger trotted ahead, nose to the wind, his breath steaming in the cold. The mountain stretched endless and unforgiving, yet Elias knew every fold and rise like the lines on his own hands. By noon they reached a rocky ridge overlooking the lower valley. Elias raised his hand, signaling Clara to stop. Below, faint but visible, a column of riders snaked through the snow. 6 men. Pike's colors. Clara's breath caught. They found us. Elias didn't answer. His jaw tightened as he scanned the horizon. They ain't far behind. 2, maybe 3 hours if they keep their pace. What do we do? He slung his rifle over his shoulder. We make for Black Hollow. There's an old mine tunnel near the creek. Nobody but me knows it's still open. We can hole up there till dark. She followed without question, trusting him more with each mile. The path was steep, ice-coated, treacherous, but Elias moved with the surety of a man born to the wild. When Clara slipped on a patch of shale, he caught her by the arm, steadying her. Easy, he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. Don't fight the mountain. Walk with it. She looked up at him, their faces inches apart, the air between them charged and quiet. For a heartbeat, everything else, Pike, the danger, the cold, disappeared. Then Ruger barked, low and sharp. Elias turned, eyes narrowing. Hoofbeats. Close. He pushed Clara toward a cluster of rocks. Down. Stay low. They ducked as 3 riders appeared at the treeline, scanning the ridge. One of them, tall, scarred, wearing a gray duster, rode with a rifle laid across his saddle horn. Pike's lieutenant. Elias cursed under his breath. They split their group. Clever bastards. The riders dismounted, spreading out. Snow muffled their steps as they moved closer. Elias raised his rifle, lining up a shot, but Clara caught his arm. No, she whispered. You'll give us away. His finger hovered over the trigger. Then he exhaled slowly and lowered the gun. We wait. Minutes crawled by like hours. The men searched, kicking through snow, scanning the rocks. One passed so close Clara could hear his spurs jingle. Her heart hammered in her chest. Then, a whistle from the valley below. The riders froze, then turned back toward their horses. One spat into the snow. Tracks end here, he muttered. They won't last the night anyway. When their silhouettes finally vanished into the trees, Clara let out a long, shaking breath. Elias didn't move until the last echo of hooves was gone. Come on, he said, helping her up. They'll circle back when they don't find bodies. They moved fast, following a narrow ravine until the sound of rushing water reached them. The mine entrance loomed ahead, half-collapsed, black as pitch, but dry. Inside, Elias lit a small oil lamp. The walls glittered faintly with quartz veins. Old mining tools lay rusting in the dirt. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Clara sank onto a rock, exhaustion washing over her. How long can we keep running? Elias leaned against the wall, silent for a moment. Long enough to make him quit. Or long enough to make him pay. The cold gleam in his eyes startled her, not cruelty, but determination hardened by years of loss. He looked at her then, voice low. You still got those papers? She nodded. Hidden in my corset lining. Pike can't buy or burn what he can't find. Good, he said. 'Cause once we reach Fort Clay, that's your proof. Those papers'll ruin him, and every lawman he paid. Clara met his gaze. And you? What happens to you when we get there? Elias shrugged, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Reckon that depends who's waitin' on the other side. Outside, the wind picked up, moaning through the hollow shafts like a restless spirit. That night, as snow blanketed the mountain again, Clara dreamed of fire and thunder, and a shadowed figure watching her from the smoke. When she woke, Elias was gone. She rushed to the cave mouth, fear rising, only to find him crouched outside, scanning the ridge again, rifle in hand. They're close, he said without turning. Too close. Tomorrow we move before dawn. The fire between them, once warmth and safety, now felt like a fragile thread against the cold fury of men hunting them. The mountain sky burned orange at dawn, streaked with ash-gray clouds and the promise of another storm. Elias had them packed before the first light broke over the peaks. The old mine had kept them safe through the night, but he knew better than to linger. Pike's men were out there. And they'd learned these hills fast. Stay close behind me, he said, tightening the rope that held their few supplies together. Once we hit the river trail, it's straight through till Fort Clay. No stops, no fires. Clara adjusted the satchel under her cloak and nodded, face pale but determined. The chill had bitten color from her lips, but her eyes, clear and unyielding, held a quiet courage Elias hadn't seen in anyone for years. They moved quickly, following the frozen river downstream. Ruger scouted ahead, disappearing into the mist and returning every few minutes, tail twitching nervously. Hours passed in silence but for the crunch of snow beneath boots. Elias's mind spun with the same thought that had haunted him all night. Clara Holt, the woman he'd once wanted to marry, now wounded and hunted by devils. And fate had thrown her back into his life as if to say, you can't hide from what you once hoped for. By midday, wind howled through the canyon, slashing like whips of ice. Clara stumbled once, nearly falling. Elias caught her before she hit the ground. You're freezing, he murmured. I can make it, she insisted through chattering teeth. He studied her, jaw tight. Your stubbornness sin. And you're too proud to admit you care, she shot back weakly. A ghost of a grin touched his lips. Maybe so. They pressed on. At last, through the gray veil of snow, they saw it, the flag of Fort Clay waving faintly atop the bluff. A few cabins clustered around the walls, smoke rising from chimneys. Safety. Civilization. But before relief could settle, Elias's instincts screamed danger. Ruger barked once, sharp. Then a gunshot cracked through the air. Down? Elias grabbed Clara, pulling her into the snow as a bullet hissed past and shattered bark from a pine trunk. Another shot, then another. Pike's men. They'd circled ahead. Elias fired back once, twice, driving the riders into cover. But there were too many. 6 men at least, fanning out, their rifles flashing in the haze. Stay behind that log, he barked, reloading. Don't move till I say. Clara crouched low, clutching her satchel. Bullets tore through the branches overhead. Ruger snarled and darted between rocks, distracting one gunman long enough for Elias to take him down with a clean shot. The echo rolled through the valley like thunder. Go, Ruger! Elias shouted. Get to the fort. The hound bolted toward the bluff, barking furiously, drawing the riders' eyes away. Elias grabbed Clara's hand. Now! They sprinted for the river crossing, the fort just beyond. Gunfire thundered behind them, snow exploding in sharp bursts around their boots. Elias pushed her ahead, shielding her with his body. The current was half frozen, bitter cold as they splashed through. His muscles screamed, but he kept moving, dragging her up the far bank. A voice rang out from the fort walls. Hold your fire. Who goes there? Creed. Elias roared. Elias Creed. Open the damn gate. For a moment, silence, then the creak of the heavy gates swinging open. 2 soldiers ran out, muskets raised. Elias half-carried Clara through as the gates slammed shut behind them. Bullets clanged against the timber, but the men outside couldn't follow. Not without dying for it. Inside, Elias sank to one knee, gasping, clutching Clara against him. Blood streaked his sleeve, a graze across his arm, nothing more. The fort captain strode forward, weathered and broad-shouldered. "Creed," he said slowly, disbelief in his tone. "Didn't think I'd see you again. Not after what happened in Laramie." Clara looked between them. You know each other?" Elias stood, jaw tightening. "We served together. Long time ago." The captain nodded grimly. "Before Pike's gold schemes tore half the territory apart." Elias's eyes darkened. "That's why we're here. She's got proof. Names. Ledgers. Enough to hang Pike and every man he paid." The captain's gaze shifted to Clara, then to her satchel. "If that's true, ma'am, you just brought the whole hornet's nest down on this fort." Outside the wind howled. Clara clutched the satchel to her chest. "Then we finish what we started." Elias turned toward her, voice low, steady. "You understand what that means, don't you? Pike won't stop. He'll burn every town between here and St. Louis to keep those papers quiet." Her chin lifted, trembling but resolute. "I'm not running anymore. I've done that my whole life." He looked at her for a long moment, and something broke inside him. Not in pain but in surrender. The kind of surrender that feels like peace. "All right," he said softly. "Then we stand." He turned to the captain. "Get your men ready. Pike's coming." The captain nodded, already barking orders. As the soldiers moved to the walls, Elias and Clara stood together near the fire pit, exhaustion lining their faces but resolve burning in their eyes. Ruger limped in through the gate then, tail wagging weakly, muzzle streaked with blood, not his own. Clara knelt beside him, tears welling. "Good boy." Elias crouched beside them, his hand finding hers. For the first time since the storm began, he let himself breathe. Fort Clay loomed around them, a wooden island in a sea of white. Outside, faint but steady, came the distant echo of hooves. Pike was coming. And this time there'd be no running. The night fell black and heavy over Fort Clay, the kind of darkness that carried both silence and threat. The garrison fires burned low, orange embers flickering against the timber walls. Every man inside the fort knew what was coming. Elias stood at the parapet, rifle slung, scanning the valley below. The snow had stopped, but the wind still bit sharp. He could hear the faint jangle of metal in the distance. Bridles, spurs, rifles. Pike's men were gathering. Below, Captain Monroe and a handful of soldiers loaded the cannons, their faces grim. "They've got at least 20 men," Monroe said. "Half of MX soldiers. Mercenaries now." Elias grunted. "That sounds like Pike. Always pays for other men to get blood on their hands." He looked toward the cabin where Clara sat inside by the fire, Ruger at her feet. The lamplight cast a soft glow across her face as she unrolled the hidden documents on the table. Maps, ledgers and letters, all marked with Pike's seal. She whispered to herself as she arranged the pages. "Everything he stole, everything he bought. All of it ends tonight." Elias stepped into the room quietly. "You sure you're ready for that?" She looked up, meeting his gaze. "You once said fate had a cruel sense of humor," she murmured. "Maybe this is fate giving me a second chance to do something right." He smiled faintly, resting a hand on the back of her chair. "You've got more grit than most men I've ever met." Before she could reply, the warning bell rang. The siege had begun. Elias grabbed his rifle and threw open the door. Across the field, torches flared like a line of fire in the snow. Pike's men rode forward, 20 at least, maybe more. Their leader rode at the front, tall in his dark coat, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his scarred face. Silas Pike. Even from the rampart, Elias could see the cruel smile twisting his mouth. "Creed." Pike's voice boomed across the valley. "I know you're in there. Hand over the woman and those papers, and maybe I'll let you live long enough to see the sunrise." Elias stepped up onto the wall, rifle in hand. "You always did talk too much, Pike." A murmur of laughter from the soldiers followed him, brief but sharp. Pike's smile faded. "Then you die with her," he snarled. "Burn the fort." His men surged forward. Gunfire erupted, echoing like thunder off the cliffs. Sparks flew as bullets struck the walls. Elias fired twice, dropping one rider then another. Clara ducked behind the barricade, clutching her satchel. Inside the chaos, Ruger growled low, pacing at her side, ears flat. Cannon fire roared from the rampart, shaking the ground. Smoke and snow filled the air. Pike's men dismounted, charging with rifles and torches. The smell of black powder and pine filled every breath. "Keep that west gate closed," Monroe shouted. Elias reloaded and fired again, then dropped behind cover beside Clara. She looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. "We can't hold them off forever." He met her gaze. "We don't need forever. just till dawn. The fight raged for hours. Bullets tore through planks. Men shouted, fell, rose again. The sky above flickered with fire and lightning, as if the storm itself had come to witness the reckoning. When the east wall took a hit from dynamite, Elias knew it was time. He turned to Clara, breath ragged. If they get inside, you run. Take Ruger and head for the canyon trail. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you, she said fiercely. You will if I tell you, he snapped. Then softer, you have to live. That's what this whole damn fight's for. Before she could argue, the gate exploded inward. Pike and 3 men burst through, gunfire flashing. Elias rolled to cover, returning fire. One outlaw dropped. Another fell screaming. Pike kept coming. Should have stayed buried up here, Creed. Pike shouted, firing wild. You and that fool heart of yours. Elias ducked behind a crate, blood seeping from a cut on his brow. Funny thing about hearts, he called back. They don't die easy. Pike lunged forward. The 2 men crashed together, rifles clattering aside. Fists flew, wood splintered, fire flared in the background. Pike was bigger, meaner, but Elias fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. They slammed against the wall, trading blows until Elias finally drove Pike back with a desperate punch. Pike staggered, grabbed a fallen pistol, aimed it at Elias. And Ruger leapt. The dog hit Pike full force, teeth sinking deep into his arm. The gun fired wild, shattering a lantern. Fire spread instantly across the floorboards. Pike screamed, shoving Ruger away. Elias charged, tackling him into the flames. Smoke filled the room, choking, blinding. Clara screamed his name as she fought through the fire toward them. When she reached them, Pike was down, his face twisted, gun still in his hand, but Elias was on his knees, coughing, blood staining his shirt. Clara dropped beside him. Elias. He looked up, one arm around her shoulders. It's done, he rasped. Pike tried to raise his gun again, but Clara grabbed the fallen rifle and fired once. The shot echoed through the fort. Pike fell still. The flames roared higher, consuming the walls. Monroe's men rushed to drag Elias and Clara outside as the last of Pike's gang scattered into the storm. Snow began to fall again, hissing as it hit the burning timbers. Elias lay in the snow, staring up at the black sky, Clara's hands pressed to his chest. His breathing was ragged but alive. Don't you dare leave me, she whispered fiercely. He smiled faintly, eyes half closed. Wasn't planning to. The fire died down slowly, the fort's ruins glowing like embers of a long war finally ended. That night, under the pale dawn light, Elias and Clara watched the sun rise over the mountains. The documents, burned at the edges but intact, lay safe in Clara's hands. Justice had a cost. But they'd paid it. And now, for the first time, they could dream beyond survival. The snow melted slowly that spring. Up in the Bitterroot Mountains, the rivers ran full and wild again, carving silver veins through the thawing land. Elias Creed stood on the ridge above his rebuilt cabin, a hammer resting on his shoulder. The scars on his hands had healed into pale lines, reminders of the fire and blood that had nearly taken everything. Below, smoke curled gently from the new stone chimney. Inside, Clara Holt moved about the room, sunlight on her hair, a quiet smile softening her face as she unpacked the few belongings they'd brought from the fort. Ruger lay by the door, gray fur streaked with old battle marks, one ear torn but tail wagging lazily in the peace of morning. Elias turned as she stepped outside, the crisp air lifting a loose strand of hair from her cheek. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, steam curling upward into the cool air. You've been up since before dawn again, she said softly, handing him one. He nodded, smiling a little. Old habits die hard. The mountains don't build themselves. She looked out across the valley, the place where snow and sunlight met in shimmering silence. You really mean to stay here? He studied her face before answering. You don't? A faint laugh escaped her lips. I think I stopped running the moment I met your dog. He chuckled low, taking a sip. Then that makes 2 of us. They stood side by side, quiet for a long time, the breeze whispering through the pines. Down below, the fort was only a black scar on the horizon now. Pike's men were gone or buried, and the documents Clara had carried through storm and fire had been delivered east. Evidence enough to hang the corruption that had poisoned half the territory. Justice had come, slow but sure. But neither she nor Elias spoke of that now. The fight was over. This moment was theirs. I still remember the day Ruger found you, Elias said finally, voice rough with memory. Thought I was just hauling some poor stranger out of the snow. Then I saw your name on that letter. Clara's gaze softened. And your heart stopped, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Reckon it did. Might have started again though. Somewhere along the way. She reached up, brushing the edge of his collar where a faint burn scar peeked through. You nearly died for me, Elias. He shook his head. No, Clara. I lived for you. There's a difference. The mountain wind swept through them then, cool and clean, carrying the scent of pine, wood smoke and thawing earth. Ruger barked once, bounding off toward the creek, his tail a blur. Clara watched him go, laughing softly. He's happier here than I've ever seen him. Yeah, Elias said quietly. So am I. She turned to him, eyes bright in the sunlight. You really think a man like you can live easy now? No outlaws, no running? He tilted his head, grinning just a little. Guess I could learn. Long as I've got someone to keep me from wandering off cliffs. Her smile bloomed slow and sure, warm as spring. Then without words she leaned in, one hand on his chest, the other curling around his neck, and kissed him. It was soft, unhurried, a promise rather than a question. The mountains seemed to hush around them. Even the wind paused to listen. When they finally parted, Elias rested his forehead against hers. Welcome home, Mrs. Creed. Clara's breath caught, laughter and tears mingling in her eyes. Took you long enough to ask. He smiled. Didn't have to ask. The mountain already decided. They stood there, two souls who'd bled and healed on the same ground, wrapped in silence deeper than any vow. Below them, Ruger splashed through the stream, barking at nothing but the sound of his own joy. And as the sun rose higher over the peaks, its golden light spilling over cabin and forest, the mountain whispered their story into the wind. Not one of sorrow but of second chances. The kind only the wild could give.